and welcome. My name is Rob Folkrod, and this is part one of a video series intending to get new instructors up to speed on Adobe Connect. Connect is the virtual environment that we use to deliver many of our online and connected classes. In this video, we're going to take a look at three sections. First, the layouts and pods that you're going to use to deliver most of your classes. Second, the settings that you'll need to get your class started on the right foot. And third, a few of the tasks that you're going to use to begin or end most of your classes. But first, we'll take a look at layouts and pods. If you look at the screen right now, you'll see that it's broken down into a number of windows. At the first, we have the overview window that has this PowerPoint deck. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see three windows, a video window, a who's here, and a chat. And down at the bottom, you'll see what we call the hands up pod, which has a series of buttons there allowing the user or clients to interact with the system. All of these pods come together to create a layout, and this layout is called the lecture layout. There's also a layouts menu that we can go to see any other layouts that might be in this classroom. And right now there are two other layouts, one entitled Lobby and one called Whiteboard. Simply clicking on one of those will take us off to another one of those layouts. Say, for example, we're about to give the classroom a break. We may send them off to the Lobby layout. As I click on that, my screen rearranges, as does all of my students. Here you'll see that we have Michael and Nancy who are also in class, and their screens also changed just now. So here we've given our students a break, we've set a little timer, the timer has elapsed, and it's now time to go back into class. We saw before we could use the layouts menu. However, in the layouts menu there's also a layout bar option that currently is closed. Clicking on the layout bar option, if you look over on the right hand side, you will see those same three layouts are displayed. I can click on the lecture layout, return to my slide deck, and give the rest of this section. Maybe I want to do a little bit of work on a whiteboard. I may go to a whiteboard section here where I have a little bit of space and can diagram a bit of my class. But now it might be time to give my class a lab. And I could drop them off in lab and leave them in the lecture section, or I could leave them here in the whiteboard, but it may be more appropriate to have a layout specifically for labs. This is when we might want to create our own layouts. I'll go back to the layouts menu, and at the very top option there is create new layout. When I create a new layout, a dialog will appear allowing me to either duplicate an existing layout and select it, or create a new one and give it a name. Here I'm going to name this one Labs and click OK. When I do, the screen goes blank. This is the new layout. As of right now, we have a layout with 0 pods in it. Let's start adding a few pods to make this a little bit more hospitable. I'm going to click on the pods menu, and from there I can click on, for example, the who's here pod. While we'll spend a little bit more time in later videos investigating each one of these pods a little bit more specifically, here we at least have the list of the names of the folks who are in class with us. It's a good start. I'm going to go back to the pods menu, and in the pods menu there are some options where we might want to add I'm going to go back to the pods menu, and in there we'll find chat. Chat has a flyaway menu that says we can either add a new chat. I'll go back to the pods menu, and we'll see a chat option. Now chat has a flyaway option that has two sub-options inside. One, add a new chat, and two, let's chat. Well, let's chat is the name of the chat window that we were seeing earlier. So I add the Let's Chat, and I arrange it on the screen where I want it. Because this is the same pod that we saw earlier, anything that is entered into this chat window will also be in there when we send folks back to the lecture at a later point in time. You'll notice the chat message is still in there. Returning to the labs layout, it may be that you want to allow students to talk about the labs without that getting in the way of other chats that you might have had earlier in the class. So I'm going to go up to the chat window here and use the pod options in the upper right hand corner. Click on the pod options and I'm going to hide Let's Chat. It's taking that pod away from this layout. I'll return to the pods menu and add a second chat. Here, when I say add a new chat, it'll add a chat pod that right now is called Chat 3. Okay. Well, Chat 3 is not a very good name. So clicking on it and pressing F2, it will allow me to rename this chat. And I'll rename that to Lab Chat. Now it's a little bit on the large side, so I may grab the corner and bring that to a respectable size. I also may want to allow my students to give me some sort of heads up, give them the opportunity to say, hey, I need some help. And for that, we typically will use one of the hands up pods. This one is found inside of the share menu, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But I add the hands up pod, and this gives my students the ability to raise their hand, to click a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I'll change that to a respectable size and move that down at the bottom. And finally, I may want to give my students a section for notes where I can supply them with tips or tricks that might be useful during the lab. I'll click on the pods option, and much like chat, we also have a notes section. And there are two notes pods that have already been added. There's a discussion notes and a more generic notes. But here I will add a third. I will give this a better name. And resize it to whatever I believe is appropriate. Once lab is finished, we can then return to a lecture and continue with the class. What we've seen so far is the ability to switch from one layout to the next, either through the Layouts menu or using the Layouts bar over on the side. We've also seen the ability to create new layouts and add pods to those as we need. Finally, we may decide that we don't need a particular layout, such as the whiteboard layout here. Maybe we incorporate whiteboard into the rest of our class. And so instead, I can click an X in the upper corner here in the layout bar, or I can manage those by going to the Layouts menu, choosing Manage Layouts, and rename and delete them from this dialog. A few other things that you may want to do are manage the settings of Adobe Connect. Inside the Meeting menu, there is a Preferences option. And inside of Preferences, there are a few things that you want to be aware of. First is under the Audio Conference section. It is generally expected that our students will be able to talk to us during the class. But most classes are going to come in with the Allow Participants to Use Microphones set to off. Before your class gets started, it's not a bad idea to open up this Preferences section and make sure that you put a check mark in there. When you do, and click Done, you will see that your students then have a microphone by their name, allowing them to turn their microphones on or off as they need them. Second, in that same window, Meeting to Preferences, there is a video screen. When you're showing video, usually the quality of kind of that medium-high section is just fine. But if you're in a classroom where bandwidth might be a little bit of an issue, you may want to bring that slider a little bit to the lower side. The same would be done for screen share. In here, we may want to bring the standard down to a medium if we're running into some bandwidth issues. And finally, there are a few tasks that you're going to be doing on a daily basis as you manage your online classroom. And the first of that is under the Meeting menu again, under Audio Setup Wizard. Each day before you run your class, you probably want to ensure that your microphone and your speakers are working appropriately. And that's what the Audio Setup Wizard does. As I click on that, a dialog will pop up giving me several steps. The first step will play a sound to ensure that your speakers are working appropriately. The second will allow you to select which microphone are you using as you're delivering the class. Many environments have multiple microphones, and it's important to select the right one before we move on to the next step. Next, you would click on the record button and speak into the microphone, making sure that the volume was appropriate. Once the recording was completed, you would then play the recording back and adjust if necessary. And then finally, you would test the silence of the room, clicking on Test Silence and not saying anything, and allowing it to detect any ambient noise and attempt to then cancel that out later on. When you were complete, it would show you the adjustments, and then you could choose Finish to finalize. Again, the Audio Setup Wizard was found inside the Meeting menu down to Audio Setup Wizard, and this should be run prior to delivering any class. After using the Audio Setup Wizard to configure your microphone, you can turn it on using the button up at the top. Clicking on the button will then enable the microphone, and it will then transmit your voice back to your students, and then clicking it again will put that on mute. Say you're going to break and you don't want to transmit during breaks. Earlier, I mentioned recordings. It is your responsibility as an instructor to ensure that your class sessions are recorded for students to play back at a later point in time. To begin a recording, you'll click again on the Meeting menu, and from that Meeting menu down to Record Meeting, where a dialog will appear. You can name the recording and then click OK to begin. When you record the meeting, you will see that in the upper right-hand corner there's a red dot indicating that the meeting is being recorded. That meeting could then be paused by clicking on the Meeting menu again, and now pause and stop recording. During breaks and lunch, you may want to pause the recording so as not to have a lot of dead air during the recording. At the end of the day, you should stop the recording, and we often stop the recording once in the middle of the day to make sure that each recording is of reasonable size. And finally, when the day is over, you'll click on the Meeting menu and you will end the meeting, terminating this session. If it is a multi-day class, you will return tomorrow, and the classroom will remember all of your settings and layouts that you established earlier. Here in this first video, we have seen how to manage and create layouts, the settings that are going to make your class work well, and the common tasks that you will need to perform on a daily basis. I hope you found the video helpful.